So concept generation and R&D strategy is actually very, very broad, as are most of the topics we're talking about today. So I tried to narrow it down to just two key questions that I think would be helpful for you, the physician innovator, the early stage concept development to know by the end of the talk. So two things I hope I can help you understand or answer are, how do I know I have the right concept? And how do I go about building and testing my concept? And also, in a nutshell, what is R&D, right? What does that include, in case you don't know? So first and foremost, I think many people, I think as Katie said, might walk in with a solution, right? You have an idea, you've thought about it, you're like, wow, this would be great, but how do you know it's the right concept? And I would challenge you, as Katie did and as many biodesign fellows will, to really think about the clinical need. And one step beyond that is, once you've got the clinical need, draft need criteria that are based on that. So it's what any concept must have to meet that clinical need, right? It's really hard. You have to put your solution aside, but it's a really good way to vet your idea and make sure that you do, in fact, have the right solution and haven't missed anything. So if we think about need criteria or need specification, what it is really, it's the guiding document for brainstorming. It's the guiding document for concept generation, and you must remain solution agnostic as much as possible. If you bias your need criteria, you're biasing the whole process. And I want to make it clear, right, this is not a product specification, right? We are not creating a guiding document for your specific solution or for a specific solution. It's not necessarily super user validated on the product level, and again, not solution specific. So whether or not you have a solution in mind, or if you have no idea, you just got really frustrated and want to figure out how to solve that frustration for yourself, need criteria and clinical need is a good place to start. So what are need criteria? At its simplest form, it is a list of must-haves and nice-to-haves for any solution. Typically, we do this by all the data we've gathered in our research, right? We've written our clinical need, and that includes the most important outcome, but maybe there are a few other outcomes you read about that you debated putting in and decided not to. This is where those belong. Typically, we do around 6 to 8 need criteria, right? You don't want to limit your solution so much that it's frustrating to come up with something. You want to make sure it is the most important. And anything that must be there is a need to have. Anything that would be beneficial but isn't going to kill your path to market can go in nice to have. And one other thing here as well, I know we want to remain solution agnostic, but there are some product attributes that you might want to include, but we should really keep these high level. And so to give you a little bit better idea of what need criteria may look like, I've included some examples, right? Things like clinical metrics, and you want to be as quantitative as possible here. Try to really understand what any solution has to meet to be successful. So decreases cost by a certain amount, decreases complications, or an acceptable duration of use, right? If you only have 5 minutes in the OR that you can take to use something, it's important to include that. Your intended user, is it you? Is it a nurse? Is it going to be used in the office, in the ASC, in the OR? And then, as I mentioned, product attributes, right? Does it have to be a certain size? Does it have to be able to move between offices? Is it going to sit on a countertop? Is it going to be used in a patient's home? So just really high-level things you want to think about before you get there. So now that you've drafted this need criteria, what do you do with it? You've come up with something that's for any solution. Your solution is set aside. And I would challenge you, even if you have a solution, think about brainstorming a little bit, right? Maybe there's something you might have missed in your initial solution, and if you don't have a solution, it's a great place to start. So the way we think about brainstorming is, how many ways can you think to solve a problem? And I've thrown up on the screen the rules of brainstorming. And so you really want to figure out what your target goal is. You want to encourage all ideas. Your goal is quantity at this point, not quality, right? We'll get to quality later. Typically, you want to do brainstorms for anywhere from like 5 to 20 minutes. I think you don't want to go too long, and just get everything out on the table. You want to go for as much as you can. So once you've done brainstorming, or once you have your own solution, you can now use that need criteria that you created to see if the solution you came up with actually fits the need. Does it fit what any solution needs to have in order to win in the market? And I would really caution you here, I think it's an easy trap to fall into. Do not change the need criteria to fit your solution, right? Your solution needs to fit the criteria and not the other way around. And so great, you've got need criteria, you've got a solution that fits the criteria. Great, you've got a concept. And now what do we do, right? Because coming up with a concept, while difficult, is like 10% of the path to market. So I want to walk a little bit through what R&D is, right? What do you need to actually build a concept and test your concept? So I think anyone that's actually done R&D would probably like laugh a little bit at this list because it's incredibly simplified, but really, really roughly, right? Research and development, or R&D, is a process where you do concept development, prototyping. You test, either bench testing in an animal or eventually in the clinic. You do quality and risk management. This is the bane of most people's existence, but incredibly important for FDA approval and making sure you create a quality product, right? Design history files, stage gates, these are some words you'll hear eventually as you go through the process. 4 is a monster of a bucket, right? Manufacturing, packaging, biocompatibility, sterilization, then regulatory approval, and ultimately product launch. I'll say those last 4 are where you'll focus more when you have a final concept, right? And this is something I'm not gonna focus on today because it's quite far down the line and something that a potential partner could end up helping you with. The place I wanna focus us today is more on this technical feasibility piece, right? What do you do once you have a solution? Where do you go? And I think this is what you're gonna do, right, to both develop that solution and to know at a base level that it works. And I'd argue that at a very bare minimum, you need this in order to attract a partner, not necessarily an equity partner, but even just an engineering partner. So knowing what you think it needs to do. And one thing I want to impress upon you is I made that into a bullet point numbered list, but really this whole process is incredibly messy and iterative is really the better word for it. So it's not a clear path. Every product is different. You might need to do things a few times, but ultimately you'll get to where you're going. And what I want to go through now is how do we prototype a minimum viable product, right, MVP, to get to proof of concept, POC, just some fun buzzwords you'll hear when you talk about R&D. So I think, again, as we resisted the urge to go directly to solutions when talking about clinical need, you want to resist the urge to go to a perfect prototype when you get into prototyping. Instead, you really want to deeply understand what are the requirements of your solution. What are you trying to test? What questions are you trying to answer? And this is where you would engage an engineering partner if you're not entirely sure how to go about it. There's many ways to engage engineers. I think many of you work at academic institutions, can go to your engineering schools, ask friends, contacts, et cetera. You now know a lot of people at Biodesign. But this is gonna be an iterative process, right? And so the goal here is to save yourself time, money, and kind of emotional cost, to be honest, as you're going through this process. So when you look at technical feasibility, right, as I said, it's an iterative process, but you start with your questions, right? Like you did with brainstorming, lay out a laundry list of things that you're curious about, figure out what you need to test, and how. You can even start with how, but really what are the things you're thinking about? And depending on your goal, you'll pick the most critical one to answer first, right? It could be about killing something, it could be about attracting a partner, generating data. Once you know the specific question you want to answer, you get to your planning, building, and testing. And I think this is an important part, right? There are different types of prototypes you can build to answer different questions, and it's not building a full functional prototype. So you've got a looks-like prototype, which is exactly what it sounds like. It looks kind of like what you're thinking of in the future, and this is a great way to show people, get them excited about something. It helps you decide between concepts or establish different variables. There's a feels-like prototype, which is more about usability, ergonomics, weight, things like that. And there's a works-like prototype. And with the works-like prototype, you can just have it do a specific function of that prototype. It doesn't have to be all the functions at once. From there, after you've done your building, planning, and testing, you're gonna assess your data, right? Just because you made data doesn't mean it's good data. Did you take into account all the variables? Is it good enough to take conclusions? And most importantly, were you really asking the right question? And iterations to be expected, right? You're never gonna get it perfectly right the first time, and every time you iterate, it's gonna get better and better. So hopefully with that, you now have a very high level basis to understand, how do I know I have the right concept, right? My answer is need criteria. Set aside any solutions or preconceived notions, craft your need criteria, brainstorm solutions, and then go back and make sure they fit. And when you're going about building and testing your concept, you want to clearly lay out requirements and do iterative prototyping, iterative testing to make sure that you're saving time, money, and expectations along the way. And that's it. Thank you.